So I have to say that there's a certain level of shame, I would even call it shame in me, that my interest in the Truth and Reconciliation process is fairly recent. I certainly had heard that the settlement agreement was being worked through, and I had heard Stephen Harper's apology. I began to hear some of the stories about the residential schools. But I must say it wasn't until about 6 months ago, when I had an opportunity to go to a pre-planning event, that I really started to take the stories into my heart rather than to just know them in my head. And a spark was lit in me at that point. And from that point to today, at the Edmonton TRC event, I've been attending as many opportunities as possible to learn more. So I've gone down to the Edmonton Native Healing Center and engaged in some learning there about some traditions and values, as well as going to a course at King's College where they very generously opened up a TRC course to the public, where I had an opportunity to hear many very engaging speakers, some survivors. I got a chance to see the Gently Whispering the Circle Back film, which gave me another level of understanding. There's just been many opportunities over the last several months to learn more. I've started to read more about it. And the main thought that keeps going through my head over and over and over again, every time I'm there, wherever the there is I wish everybody could hear this. I wish everybody could understand and get this on their radar. Of course, the emotions are deep, that you can't quite understand that this ever could have even happened. One of the things that resonates a lot with me in some of the stories is particularly if it's someone that grew up in the 50s and 60s as I did, and I cast my mind back to what my life was like then as a school child, and totally unaware that this was happening elsewhere. It's just, yeah, I get so moved. And I guess one of the learnings that I really would like to share from the Native Healing Center engagement that I've had is I long ago abandoned the word sin. But when I was there, they talked about their perspective of sin, and they called it living outside the circle. And I have just been walking with that, and I think that's a level that people could engage with, living outside the circle of nature, living outside the circle of relationships, and the degree to which so many people in our society function outside the circle, which means we don't relate one-on-one with people. Something else I'd like to say about the event itself is I've never been anywhere with this many Indigenous people. And how can that be that they're kind of invisible in society? They're either, someone you kind of avoid looking at on the street, or you don't see them at all. And that's also something that I've been aware of, and on a go-forward basis, I would hope that our church will be able to set up some kind of a relationship so that they're not so invisible. I'm certainly in a mostly Caucasian congregation on the south side, away from the inner city. And as I've been going to the Healing Center, we've been talking about how do we maintain a relationship. And I'm hoping that I can go back to my congregation and say, how can we set up some kind of intentional process to stay in touch? I want to stay in touch with the ladies that have been teaching me their traditions. They're just delightful, and we've talked about getting together for coffee. So it's those kinds of things, I think, in the longer run that are going to really change the change. Like, be the change you want to see in the world, right? And that change happens on one-on-one engagement. And can I just tell you a small story that happened to me yesterday? So I've been, of course, really engaging in this process, trying to touch at a soul level what I can do in terms of service in the world around this, and just trying to be present and attentive. And yesterday, as I rode the LRT down to the Shaw Center, there was an Indigenous individual sitting behind me who was singing loudly. And immediately I had kind of a sort of an autopilot reaction. And then I remembered my practice of presence, and so I just started to send him blessings. And then as it happened, I got up out of my seat and almost got off at the wrong stop. So when I sat down again, we actually then were able to engage eye to eye. And so he said, I love to sing. And I said, I can tell. And he said, my name is. And I said, my name is Sherry. And we had this short conversation because I had to get off at the next stop. But as I got up, he said, thank you for acknowledging me. And so, you know, it was just one of those little moments, but it was such a reminder to me to remember to do that. And that's really what this process of storytelling is about. Is I want you to acknowledge me, and I want you to acknowledge my experience. And if we just sit across from each other and have a conversation, that can happen.